We needed to start with a great script. A few years ago, I had spoken to a playwright named Sue Bigelow. One day we were talking and I said, Sue, I'm getting really interested in video production. And someday, it's gonna be a while, but somewhere down the line, could be years from now, do you have a script that you would let us film? And she said, absolutely, I have in fact the perfect script. It's a small principal cast. It takes place in Humboldt County, in the forest, in a cabin. I think it would be very doable for a film production. And so I said, well, great. When the time comes, I'm going to call you up again and I'm going to say, hey, remember that Autumn Run script that you talked to us about? And so I knew that we would have a script that was very well crafted, beautiful story, and written by a local playwright. So we were finally ready. We were ready mentally, physically, financially. We were ready to make a movie. Well, very sad situation. Sue had passed a few years before our decision to go into production. So I contacted her playwright partner, Janice Goldberg, who lives in New York City. And Janice said, absolutely, Sue and I had spoken about this years ago. And she said, if you guys were ever ready to make a movie, she would like you to film Autumn Run. So that's how Autumn Run came about. We got the script. We worked on the screen adaptation. And it took us a full year to do that. It was very wordy. It's a stage play. I have faith that audiences can watch and listen to a story with a few extra words in it. So call me crazy, but we decided not to take too much out of the script. We modified it just a little bit. The original theatrical play had 4 principal characters. They were 4 brothers. And then it had the character of Tracy. That was it.
See, Phil would stop fishing after he caught enough for dinner.
Didn't matter how great the fishing was, he would stop. Because he didn't have an answer for why somebody would catch a fish if they weren't going to eat it. For the sport of it made no logical sense to him, and if it didn't make any sense to him, then he didn't do it. He understood why the salmon would come back to the place of their birth to spawn. He just could never figure out why they would leave in the first place.
You'd stop fishing after you got enough for dinner. Didn't matter how good the fishing was, you'd stop. Because there was never an answer for why anyone would catch a fish if they weren't trying to eat it. For the sport of it made no logical sense. And if it made no sense, then you didn't do it. It was like you knew why the salmon came to the place of their birth to spawn. But what you can never figure out is why they left in the first place.
We started looking into where could we film this story. Camp Mattole Retreat Center was what we went to check out to see if this might meet our needs for a film set. I remember Dawn and I drove up there March of 2020. It was right before the big COVID thing hit. And it takes about 2 hours to drive up from Eureka. And we got there and we were just blown away. We just looked at it and went, oh my God, that cabin could be our set. Oh my gosh, look at all these living quarters. There's a commercial kitchen. The river's right there. The trees are there. It was just one of those meant to be's. And we could afford it, which was awesome. We utilized every building at the camp, basically. Thank goodness there was a lot of space there. Some of the little cabins are like 110 years old. It was just an amazing adventure for everybody. For the amount of stage productions I have been involved in, and especially when I direct, it's a rare thing that you don't get a couple of actors kind of, he told me how to say my line or blah, 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 I didn't see any of that here. There was a reason that I invited these particular actors to all be a part of this group, because I really looked at that carefully when making a decision of who I wanted to be in the movie. And I thought, will this person be good to get along with? Will they get along with others? And that was a real driving factor other than the talent. We wrote the screenplay in 2019. We decided at the end of 2019 that we would film in November of 2020. No idea what was coming our way. No idea at all. Well, by that time, COVID had set in. And I'm thinking, well, there's no way that COVID's still going to be raging like this in November. So I'm just going to move forward and we're going to cast it now. Well, you know what? Yeah, COVID was still a pretty major deal. As I mentioned before, I've been a theatrical director for a long time up here, and I knew the actors that I wanted to invite to be a part of this production. I didn't want to have a big audition, not for this one, because it was such an intimate show and we only needed 4 principals. I called a few people and I asked them if they would be interested in auditioning for a movie.
You can take your mask off.
Yeah, you can take your mask off.
Oh, cool. So the date is June 20th, 2020, and we're doing an audition for Autumn Run. Yeah.
So who are you?
Who am I? Rob?
No, you're James Gadd.
I'm James Gadd. That's who I am.
I don't know yet.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah. I don't know who I am.
Hey, Captain Ahab sails the open seas in search of the... What was the name of the whale? Damn it, Phil? He searches the seas for a whale named Damn it, Phil.
Ah! Captain Ahab sails the open seas in search of... What was the name of that whale? Damn it, Phil! He searches the seas for a whale named Damn it, Phil.
Rhinehart gave me that the summer I turned 15. Tied that leather strap around my neck. And on the end, there were these 3 beads. The wisdom of your years, he said. He smiled at me.
Rhinehart gave me that the summer I turned 10. He tied that leather strap around my neck, and on the end of it were 3 beads. The wisdom of your years. He smiled at me.
Nah, I like it this way. Went into hardware because I like hardware. And I still like our little town. Old Mrs. Swain sends her son in after a plumbing part. Well, I like knowing where the flapper's going. I like it this way. I went into hardware because I like hardware. And I still like our little town. Old Mrs. Swain sends her boy in after a plumbing part. And I like knowing where the flapper is going.
Phil would go with me, but I don't think I'll ask him unless I really have to. I like Ben better anyways. He's got a wild side.
Rob would go with me, but I don't really think I'll ask him unless I need to. I like Ben better anyway. He's got a wild side.
I probably made about 3 phone calls for actors that were not available and or uninterested at the time, but the actors that you see on screen are the only actors that I auditioned, with the exception of 1.
Yeah, that sort of looks like something Faye's put a down payment on a beach condo. Sort of sold 10 of them this year so far. Obviously someone knows what I'm painting.
We had originally cast the role of Jimmy, fantastic actor named Jordan, and unfortunately about 3 weeks before we moved down to the camp to start filming, a tragedy struck his family. And we had a nice long heart-to-heart, and I just basically said to him, it's like, Jordan, only you can make this decision. If you need to be with your family, and frankly, considering what's happened, I think you need to be with your family. That being said, it's really hard for me to say that because you are Jimmy. I mean, you're the person I wanted in this role. You've been rehearsing for this role for a couple of months now, but there are going to be other roles. Your family is your family. So in anticipation of perhaps him not being with us, I got the name of an actor. He's somebody I'd never met before, and I called him up and I just said, hey, are you available? And he says, yeah, I'm available. I said, well, it may or may not happen. I just need to know if we have a backup plan in place. And he said, yeah, I'll be your backup plan. Give me a call in a couple days. Let me know if Jordan's able to do the role or not. If he's not, I'll come in and audition for you. So a couple days later, Jordan and I talked again, and he made what I think is the right decision. He chose family, so I was really pleased that he chose his family, and a little nervous for where we were at with the production.
I do like the sock puppet idea. Stop that, Jimmy.
Then I called Jesse back up. We got him in that night.
Hey, I got the gun, got the bullets. I'm halfway there.
Yeah, don't...
That's why they call it target practice.
Look, Jimmy.
It's James. And I said I'm going. Hey, I got the gun, I got the bullets, I'm halfway there.
Yeah, but you don't got the...
That's why they call it target practice.
Look, Jimmy.
It's James, and I said I'm going.
What are you so pissed off at?
He auditioned, and I went, wow, where'd this boy come from? It was an amazing thing that he was able to come in. It was, at this point, it's about 2 weeks before we leave for the camp. I've been rehearsing with the actors for a couple of months now. So Jesse and I had about 2 weeks together. All the other actors rallied around and got back in and started really rehearsing their scenes with him and everything. And sure enough, 2 weeks we were down at the camp. He fit right in as if he'd been there all along, and he was prepared. He brought some stuff to that character that was way different than what Jordan was doing, but it was absolutely beautiful and absolutely spot on.
Sorry I'm late. It's been a long while since I've been on those back roads. So, how are you?
Good. Great. How are you?
Good. Great.
Things like that would happen throughout the entire movie. Ben, or AJ, needs to ride a motorcycle. AJ's not a motorcycle rider, but wow, was he excited to learn. So we contacted this guy named Jack, who is an expert motorcycle rider, has several different motorcycles, and he set out about 3 motorcycles for us to choose from, and he's like, any one of these would be cool to have AJ on, and I can teach him how to ride any one of these. This one over here might be a little bit easier to ride, and I said, yeah, let's go with the one that's a little easier to ride. And I look at the bike and I'm like, what is that on the side of the bike? And I went, are you kidding? Out of the 3 bikes we got to choose from, we choose the one that has salmon decals on either side of the bike. And Jack was like, yeah, they've been there for like 20 years. And I'm like, Jack, do you know what this movie's about? And he goes, no, not really. I'm just here to teach AJ how to ride a motorcycle. And I'm like, it's kind of all about, you know, family, but has a lot to do about a salmon run. That's the name, Autumn Run. I'm like, this is pretty weird that the bike has salmon on it, but we took that as a sign. And AJ got to learn to ride a motorcycle. They met several times on and off. By the time we got up to the camp, he had his permit and he was set and ready to go. Serendipity, I think, would be a great word for it.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
Yes,
AJ, what did you do?
I'll disrobe so I can show you the full extent.
Oh, sure.
I just want to say on our one day where we have the motorcycle insurance, we won't be needing the insurance, but we had it today, so today's the only day he gets to ride the motorcycle, but we had a little
These are purely for insurance records.
Of course, for records, you know. You know, not too bad.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Maybe with this? Actually, I'm going to let you do your thing because you know more about this than I do.
Go for it, mix and mingle, do the director. I got you.
Oh, and look at that, mismatched socks.
Oh, always, you gotta have the mismatched socks.
So we decided to set out on our search to find White Hawk. I said, you know what, if we're gonna ride him, he's out there. Well, one day our costumer is in line getting some takeout at a restaurant here in Eureka, and she spots this guy who looks physically just like what we pictured White Hawk to look like. He's an older gentleman, Native American. He's even wearing jeans and boots and a Western shirt and a hat and everything. And so she just went right up to this guy who she'd never met before and said, hey, would you like to be in a movie? And he just kind of looks at her and he's like, well, okay. I mean, I'd be happy to talk about it. I've never done anything like that before. And she's like, well, let me get your number and I'll have the director call you. So I called and I made contact with Joseph. This is one of the reasons why we do movies, why we do stage plays. The people we get to meet, the people that come into our lives that we would have never had the opportunity to meet, and Joseph is one of those guys. So sure enough, he came down and auditioned for us, and he was absolutely perfect. I said, just be yourself. Another character that we wrote in was the character of Little Ben. Once again, just trying to make a movie more visual. We thought we'd start by showing Ben in his younger self of when he actually meets White Hawk. So we had to find an actor who was about maybe 10 or 11 years old to play this role. And it just so happens that living down at the camp, the daughter of the camp manager, her name is Renee, she's exactly the right age, she bears a very close physical resemblance to AJ, who is playing Ben. One day when we were down there visiting the camp and looking it over and talking about how we were going to make this movie and this and that, I asked her mom, Valerie, I said, hey, do you think Renee would want to be in a movie? I know she's never done anything like this before. And so we got our little Ben because she happened to live at the Mattole Camp and Retreat Center. She was just right there waiting for us. So that was quite the meant to be. And then of course I asked Valerie if Valerie would play the mother of these siblings. And Valerie said, sure, why not?
Benjamin, you better not be shooting at my pie.
So White Hawk Little Ben and the mother were characters you never saw in the stage production, but that we decided to add them once again more for a visual element. But with White Hawk especially, we really wanted to show that character and his relationship with Ben. And we couldn't have been more thrilled with the actors that we got. First thing I needed to do was make sure we had a good tech crew signed up, because if we're not going to have good filming and good sound, you know, I mean, we can have the best acting in the world and it might be okay, but we were really, really lucky with Matt St. Charles and his crew and Bruce Paws and his sound crew. And those are the two guys that I lined up really early in the game.
People covering the windows. People shutting out the light. People find what we need. People, we're all sisters and brothers. We gotta share the love, share the love. Share the love, share the love.
Expect the unexpected, right? I gotta be honest with you, there were only two things I was really concerned about moving forward with the filming were COVID and the weather.
Oh, today's the first day of fall, September 22nd, 2020. And I have my mask on because we're living in COVID land, in the land of apocalypse.
We had a little bit of control over COVID. We could do everything that was recommended. We had a 5-page COVID plan. I had discussed our rehearsals and our situation with a public nurse here locally, making sure that we were doing everything properly. It was very interesting as a director to direct actors where you never see their face. Because everybody wore a mask the whole rehearsal time. Everything was done with COVID in mind and to keep everybody safe and healthy. Every night after rehearsal, I would spray down and wipe down the whole rehearsal area. We had our first read-through outdoors with the whole cast. Our fight choreographer, Caroline, was amazing. She opened up the front yard at her own personal house to have outdoor fight choreography rehearsals.
Yeah, we're falling on the ground. Sorry I'm late.
It's all with my own 2 eyes what that son of a bitch did! God, yeah, you're freakishly strong. Let go of me.
Sorry I'm late.
Everything had to be done with COVID in mind. Everybody was doing whatever they could to make sure we were moving forward and keeping everybody safe and healthy at the same time.
We're gonna make everything work. I mean, that's just what we're gonna do.
We were really, really fortunate to have a production office. Now, it was not ideal for the rehearsal situations. A retired orthodontist had his building up for sale. There are a lot of patient rooms. There's not like one big, huge space where you can map out and block everything. So actors would just, you know, when we knew that they were going to be walking, they would just walk around the inside of the building or go up and down the hallway, just keep moving. And one thing that turned out to be really awesome because of the limited space that we had to rehearse in, when they got to the great outdoors, man, it was a breeze. I said, you know how you've been walking up and down 12 times while you say these lines?
Wasn't if I had any sentimental attachment to that stuff. Just because you think the spirit of Dad lives in that fly rod doesn't mean Mom chose to hang out in the carnival glass.
I can't believe you sold that yellow china.
It's orange. What the hell is it to you? You're selling the cabin. Dad's cabin.
Fine.
Wasn't as if I had any sentimental attachment to that stuff. Just because you think the spirit of Dad lives in that fly rod doesn't mean Mom chose to hang out in the carnival glass.
I can't believe you sold that yellow china.
It's orange. And what the hell is it to you? You're selling the cabin. Dad's cabin?
Fine.
The actors were so over-prepared We were able to marry what I know really, really well to do, and the actors know really well to do because they all come from a stage background, and that is to marry live stage theater rehearsals with what we thought movie rehearsals should be. So every actor was extremely well prepared. And that was the one thing I knew with a 16-day shooting schedule. Jesse was the only one that had about 2 weeks of rehearsal time. We were not going to have time to slow down because of the acting. I knew that there would be technical glitches or angles or sound or props. You know, there were going to be things that we needed to stop for, but I didn't want it to be because of the acting. Everybody was ready to go by day 1 of shooting, and we just went on from there. One of the amazing things about the talent that we did attract to this film was most of the actors would not have been available if it hadn't been for COVID. A lot of them were already scheduled to do stage productions in 2020. So that's pretty much the only good thing I'm going to say about COVID, because that fucking shit sucks, man. Just, what the fuck, right? That's all you can say about COVID. What the fuck?
Girls shouldn't say things like that.
I can say fuck if I fucking well feel like saying fuck. Fuck, 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 fuck.
Well, you shouldn't.
It's free country.
Dawn and I went down a few times to the Mattole Camp and Retreat Center before we actually started filming. A few weeks before and a couple months before, we would take the tech crew, for instance. Before we started filming, we went down with the entire cast. So we got to do a little bit of a walkthrough, some rehearsal time there. And then we took the cast one more time before we filmed. So that was all the cast had down there, and the crew, really. 1 or 2 trips down there before we got there. It became even more important that we be really well rehearsed before we got down there. When people arrived at the camp, they were greeted with a welcome package of sanitizer wipes, gloves, masks, Kleenex, and hand sanitizer. Woohoo! Welcome to the age of COVID. You know, it was just so important for me to make sure that everybody was kept safe and that we all got through this with our health intact. My logical thinking was, well, we're all going to be basically quarantined for 16 days.
I came a long way to get here.
Everybody was in total agreement. We had up to about a week before we went down there. That was my time frame where I said, you know what, this all needs to be canceled because of COVID. Because about a week before we're scheduled to go, that's it. We're going, we're committed. So everybody just was on board, you know. We were extremely well organized and well planned. From the time we got up to the cabin, which was Friday, November 6th, we were going to start filming on Saturday, November 7th, and if needed, we would have in the morning on Sunday, November 22nd to finish up anything we couldn't quite do. So we'd allowed for about 16 days to film. I know that doesn't sound like much, but we were all down there and living in the camp 24/7, all with each other, and that's all we were there to do. So we would wake up early in the morning, we would get organized, we would go out and film our scenes that we had planned for the day, and we had to be done by about 5 o'clock because it started getting dark at that time. So it was a pretty crazy schedule, but it was also kind of exhilarating just to move at that pace. I thought it was a lot of fun. The actors sometimes were like, oh, this is moving kind of fast, but I'm like, yeah, but you know, this is what we're here to do.
You have to ask me a question.
How are you feeling about it so far?
Oh, it's so awesome.
Rob, when you're ready, we'll do a quick run through. So the one luxury I afforded myself as producer / director was I got to cast a family member. Going back to who was not actually in the script for the stage production, that was the dog, Spike. So the dog, the dog that you're going to see in the movie is named Kalani, and he's my dog.
This is Kalani without his costume. His handler, who is his father, insisted on putting a costume on him. He said all good dogs would have a bright colored bandana on if they live around the forest so they're not accidentally shot by hunters.
Absolutely.
And he did a good job. Kalani, sit.
Oh.
See, he is well trained. Come on, come.
Now the weather didn't have a lot of control over that for sure.
Man, I still can't get used to how quick the weather changes out here.
I was concerned because if it starts raining a lot while we're at the camp, a lot of our scenes are outdoors. In fact, that's why we were at the camp, is to have that beautiful outdoor scenery, to have the river and the forest and the cabin. I mean, it's all pretty much an outdoor shoot. There's very little going on indoors. Sure enough, first week we get there, it's pretty dry. Second week, man, we had some storms. There were a couple of storms that rolled in, and they were fierce storms, and it opened up and it just started pouring. Now, a couple of interesting things happened because of the weather. First of all, we decided to film all of the flashback scenes at the end of our shoot. So we were going to do everything in the present day at the beginning of the shoot when we first got there.
Hey, how is it?
Feels good. Always feels good in the fall. Water's clean and clear.
It's cold.
Not too crazy cold. We'll be soon.
So when we first got there, the river was pretty low. I mean, you could just walk across the river in most spots. Second week, it started storming to the point where the river just completely filled from bank to bank. It just completely changed the look of the river. It was amazing to watch that kind of force of nature in play right in front of our eyes. I mean, from a river that you could just walk across to a river that you now couldn't even get down to the bank of the river, all within a matter of days. It had just changed. But what was really super cool about that was we were getting ready at that point to do the flashback scenes. And so that gave the look of the flashback scenes a whole other look. Maybe it could be 10 years in the past. The river even looked different.
I'm just telling you.
You ain't telling me nothing.
The other thing that happened was one of the days we really needed to film an outdoor scene, but it was raining really hard. David said, you know, there's a shed down there that we could probably use to film this scene inside. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to film it inside. I want them to be in the giant redwoods and all of this kind of stuff. And he's like, well, it's pretty cool, Carol. You should go check it out. And we're standing out there, and I mean, it's just crazy. It's like blowing, like, I don't know how hard. Rain's coming down sideways, and we're like, nah, you know, I don't think this is going to work. I better go check out that shed. Well, the shed was the shed where the camp keeps all of their building materials and their maintenance stuff. And they have lawnmowers in there, and rakes, and saws, and hammers, and paint buckets, and everything. And I went, well, you know what? Their father was a contractor. It's stated in the script. They talked about that. He built the cabin. I'm like, they can be in their father's workshop and talking about the father. And I just went, wow, what an amazing thing. The scene turned out to be so much better than I had planned for it because, you know, we had a bunch of outdoor scenes already. It was nice to move something indoors. And it's because of the weather that we had to make that decision. And I think it turned out for the best.
Where did this rain come from?
Humboldt County weather. Give it a few.
I had storyboarded the entire movie. I mean, I have over 100 pages of storyboards, and I am not a great artist. So my storyboards were very much like little stick figures. But, you know, I'm like, well, what the heck? At least we have something that we can refer to. You know, if something better comes along, I was always happy to get rid of those storyboards and say, okay, as long as it tells the story and moves it forward. So we did. We got some much better footage than anything that I could have put on my storyboards or anything that I did put on my storyboards. But I gotta say, I kind of grew very fond of the stick figures. So I'm just saying, storyboards can be whatever you need them to be. Just think it was good to have a plan. Along the lines of things that you have no control over. A week before we were to go down there and start filming, the camp manager, Valerie, who was also supposed to be our caterer, we had hired her to, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was the one thing we were going to provide for everybody with all living accommodations. They got a hot shower, they get a place to sleep. They were going to get fed breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and of course snacks would be available all day long. Well, a week before we got down to the camp, she had a fire in her house and made the house completely unlivable. So she was no longer able to be our caterer. She obviously had some higher priorities that she needed to focus on, and that was finding a place to live. So my co-producer, Dawn, stepped up, and Dawn became our camp cook. We also had a lot of cast and crew that volunteered to help out with some meals, And many people would offer to do dishes for us at night and help Dawn out in the kitchen. But man, that kitchen was run extremely effectively because Dawn sacrificed what she was planning and hoping to do with her 2 weeks down there on the film set. The music that we're using for this movie is just really interesting to me because we used several different artists, and most all of them live in Humboldt County, or they all have ties to Humboldt County. Most of the music that you hear in this movie was already created for other purposes and that the artist generously allowed us to use for the backdrop of our film to give it the life and to make the soundtrack for Autumn Run. We did commission one original song and we've decided to call it Autumn Run. The music was written by Jeff Smoller, the vocals are done by Fiona Ryder, and it's just fantastic to get to ask local musicians to put together an original piece of music. We had a lot of fun with that. One thing that's never mentioned in the stage production of Autumn Run, and we don't mention it at all in the movie, is what is the last name of the siblings. Never really cared to make a big deal about it in the movie, but we did want to pay homage to Sue Bigelow. Like I said, she had passed away a few years ago, and she was one of those just wonderfully warm, funny, generous people that was just goofy and so frickin' talented. We wanted to pay a little homage to Sue and to say thank you again for letting us use your script. So if you look very closely, in the scene at the beginning when Rob is driving up to the cabin, he gets out of his truck and he opens his door and it says Bigelow Family Hardware on the side of his truck. And that was our way of paying homage to Sue. So we're done filming all that great stuff, and we turn it over to our editor. We have an editor by the name of Alan Olmstead, and Alan is, well, he's just a saint. It's like, here's your film that we made in 16 days. I hope everything looks good, and I hope it's consistent continuity. So he gets to put together this film. There's some technical glitches that we didn't know about when we brought the film back, and God love him, he's just working around them. So that's kind of the story of how we made Autumn Run. We rehearsed as if we were a stage production. We are working on a very micro budget with this film. People involved in this crew, we're a very small independent film. Most of us are working 9 to 5 jobs. A lot of us used our vacation time to come and do this movie. And so it just means that you might be stepping up and doing more than one thing. By the time it was all over and done with, we actually ended up filming by Saturday afternoon, November 21st, and we had completed all filming within 15 days. We cleaned out the entire camp by the next morning, and by noontime on Sunday, basically, everyone was gone. It was just as if we hadn't been there. Anyhow, I hope you enjoy the movie, because we had a great time putting it together. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. Considering that most of us work 9 to 5 jobs, and this is what we do on our weekends and in our evenings, and a lot of us had never worked on a film before, I think that we did a pretty darn good job. I'm really proud of what we've done. I'm proud of all the people that helped and all of the people that contributed. our tech crew, our cast, and our whole community. Thank you. We couldn't have done it without your support. And let's hope that this is just one of many, many, many films in the future that will be coming from Humboldt County so the whole world can see what Humboldt County has to offer.
Cue, take two.
Action.
No!
Oh, I'm so sorry.